Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you on the brand new Kunze Panzer. This is a tier 9 German reward medium tank that you're going to be able to get from the Battle Pass this year. And the vehicle looks set to take the crown of the title of Best Gun Depression on a Tier 8 plus vehicle. And that is because the Kunze Panzer has a natural gun depression of 10 degrees, which you can add on to that with a whopping 5 extra degrees of gun depression if you use the vehicle's hydro-pneumatic suspension, which means that this will also be the first German vehicle with a hydro-pneumatic suspension. So before I get to show you exactly what it's capable of on the battlefield, let's compare it to some of its competition at Tier 9. So let's compare the Kunze Panzer to the Kunze Panzer, the Leopard prototype, and the Kampfpanzer 50T, which was the reward vehicle for playing ranked, I believe, last year. So before all of you think, well, QuickyBaby's finally lost his marbles, well, firstly, I'd like to point out I never had any marbles to begin with anyway. But no, the Kunze Panzer actually has different statistics inside and outside of using the hydro-pneumatic suspension. So here, for example, we can see the statistics inside, a nice amount of DPM, but when you go into the hydro-pneumatic suspension, to be able to gain an additional 5 degrees of gun depression, your DPM actually goes down, but your aim time and your accuracy improve, but your dispersion values get worse and your vehicle gets slower. So this will make for a very interesting tank comparison as we take a look to see how the two versions of the Kunze Panzer on the left, outside of using the siege mode or the hydro-pneumatic suspension, however you want to say it, and on the right, using. So immediately we notice that the Kunze Panzer outside of the siege mode has the best damage per minute of any of these vehicles. 2,516 is a great rate of fire. That's better than the E50M is at tier 10 and really sets this vehicle up as a high damage dealing medium tank with that 6.45 rounds a minute rate of fire. However, as soon as you go into the siege mode of this vehicle, it's going to drop down to 4.88. which actually is a 25% reduction, and then you're going to be worse than the Leopard prototype and the Kampfpanzer 50T. And so don't expect to just sit inside one mode in this vehicle. You've got to switch in and out of it, which takes 2 seconds to be able to fully benefit how you're going to play the tank. Outside of this, the firepower of the vehicle is impressive. It has 268 millimeters of standard penetration with 1,478 meters a second shell velocity, and premium rounds with decent shell velocity with 300 millimeters of heat pen. Awesome stuff on this tank. And while it's not quite as good as the Leopard prototype's 323 millimeters of premium penetration with even better shell velocity, it's still decent enough and isn't going to hold you back. Unless, of course, you want to just be spamming gold at long range at very heavily armored tanks, and then you're probably better to go for a different vehicle. One thing I enjoy about this tank is that you have enough ammunition to take a variety of rounds, 50 to be exact, so you can take a lot of APCR, heat, and also high explosive rounds. You're never going to be running out and not having the right ammunition for the right job. So now onto the gun handling, and this is where the Kunze Panzer is kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of tank. It actually has the worst gun handling in this comparison when you're outside the siege mode with 2.7 seconds aim time, 0.42 accuracy, although its gun dispersion values are actually the best in this comparison. So it means that outside of the siege mode, you'll take a very long time to aim, but your movements won't make the reticle actually bloom out very much. But when you go into the siege mode, now your aim time is impeccable and your accuracy is best in this class at 0.3. And so you definitely want to be inside the siege mode when you need to make precise shots against weak points on your opponents, or you want to just be accurate at long range. But now, of course, your rate of fire becomes horrific, and also the dispersion values on the tank become really bad, meaning that you should probably be using vertical stabilizers on this vehicle, or the amount that it blooms is not really even going to be pulled in with the fantastic aim time that the vehicle has. All in all, it's a little bit weird, because unlike the Swedish tank destroyers where you just have to enter the siege mode if you actually want to use your gun depression at all and fight back against your opponents, this one enters the siege mode to gain those extra 5 degrees of the hydro-pneumatic suspension, to become more accurate, and also to gain that enhanced aim time, but you're sacrificing dispersion, you're sacrificing rate of fire to be able to use that. So all in all, you probably don't want to be using the hydro-pneumatic suspension unless you need that gun depression or you need the extra accuracy at your disposal. And it kind of makes this vehicle a bit bizarre, because it can kind of be best in class at both of these aspects, but just not at the same time. Which means that the very strong players of you out there will love this vehicle because you will know when to make that transition and to do nothing in your tank for 2 seconds while you are making the transition, and then make use of the vehicle's awesome 15 degrees of gun depression. So you might be looking at me here and saying, QuickyBaby only says 10. Well, that is not the case. And look at Tanks GG. Tanks GG has this amazing new system for showing gun depression on the tank. And while it looks a little bit confusing and some kind of evil eye that's staring at you, just look at how the new mechanics work on Tanks GG. So here's 0 degrees going up to 10 degrees of gun depression now naturally. And then look, the Kunze Panzer inside the siege mode can use 5 extra degrees of gun depression by tilting the front of the tank down or the back of the tank up. It goes hand in hand, really. But remember, this is only going to be at the front of the vehicle that you can achieve 15 degrees of gun depression. Because, of course, if you want to aim over the side, then you're actually not going to have that extra gun depression because the vehicle can't tilt sideways, it can only tilt forwards and tilt backwards. So all in all, I must say a massive thank you to Tanks GG for putting such an awesome system in the game, for being able to explain it, and also to be able to finally show what the STB-1 is like as well, with its 14 degrees of frontal gun depression, and even showing how it works on the back. I mean, that is just amazing. Tanks GG, like, major props to you for that. So next up, let's look at the mobility of this vehicle. Now, when you're outside the siege mode, you can go at 65 forwards and 23 backwards, but when you're inside it, you're limited to 30 forwards and 17 backwards. So you can't just sit inside the siege mode. You can pull back quickly, but you're definitely going to feel like one of the more sluggish medium tanks. Now, I guess if you were absolutely crazy, you could put a turbo on this vehicle, and that would actually mean that inside the siege mode, you could go at 35 forwards and you could still go backwards at 20, and that would actually mean you could go at 70 forwards and 26 backwards if you were using the turbo outside of the siege mode. But I feel like there are better modules to use on this tank, and I don't think it needs the extra speed, unlike you would on a Swedish tank destroyer, for example. Now, this means that you're actually faster than the Leopard prototype because you have a better power to weight ratio and you can go slightly faster backwards, and you make the Kampfpanzer feel very sluggish in comparison compared to the Kunze Panzer. However, I must highlight that the traverse speed on this vehicle is worse than the Leopard prototype, and considering how this vehicle doesn't have upgradable engines, unlike the Leopard does, and the way that the calculations are made, that it will actually have worse traverse speed than you might be accustomed to if you were a Leopard prototype driver. Okay, now let's move on to the armor of the Kunze Panzer, and this is where it's actually really bad news for the vehicle. The tank pretty much doesn't have any armor. 50 on the lower plate, 40 on the upper plate means that you're going to get overmatched by 122mm caliber guns, and the turret at its thickest is 63. This is not a good tank with regards to the armor. You might be able to ricochet off the upper plate, but you do have this big fat lower plate that you're going to be exposing. And remember, all vehicles with 91mm caliber guns are going to overmatch your side armor, so never side scrape in this tank. You might as well come around the corner and hope that they miracle bounce off your frontal hull, and that upper hull is going to get overmatched by all 122mm caliber guns. So if you're expecting this thing to be like a Kampfpanzer with regards to its armor, that's not going to happen. The vehicle also has a slightly lower amount of hit points compared to its German cousins here and its competition at 1,600. But one thing I really like is the camo rating. The camo rating is better, much better than the Leopard prototype, and just a touch better than the Kampfpanzer. And it still has a 400 meters view range on this vehicle, and so that means that you can probably get away without using coated optics on the Kunze Panzer. So if you have a really good crew, like I do on this tank, I have a Leopard crew, which works perfectly on this vehicle, and your Leopard crew will be having situational awareness and will also be having recon. If you combine this with Brothers in Arms and also a premium consumable, you can get 466 meters view range if you are using bounty vents on this tank, so no need to be using coated optics. However, if you're not willing to use the premium consumable, your view range might drop to an uncomfortable amount, only 445 exactly, but I still think that will probably be enough because you will get better use out of vents, you'll get better use out of a gun rammer on this vehicle, because I really feel like you want to pump up the DPM as much as possible. And that really leaves the last module. Now, for me personally, I'm going to use vertical stabilizers on this vehicle to give it the just top tier gun handling. But also importantly, when you're inside the siege mode, remember how bad those dispersion values are. And if you don't have vertical stabilizers, then you're really going to bloom out a lot, even with micro movements. But anyway, I think that's quite enough jibber jabber on the Kunze Panzer. Let me just show you how the new highest gun depression tank that even feels like its turret is tilting forwards is going to perform on the battlefield. So here we go, we're rocking out with the Kunze Panzer playing on Tundra, and I must admit this was the first game that I had in the vehicle, so you're going to be seeing me making mistakes. You're going to see me using the wrong mode for the vehicle, but that will allow me to be able to highlight the mistakes that you will make initially in this tank, and then hopefully if you decide to be able to get this vehicle, or if you even can manage to get this vehicle, because you're going to have to spend a good amount of time to be able to complete the battle pass to be able to achieve it, that hopefully you will be a better player, because that in theory is what the tank reviews are all about, right? One thing I failed to mention in the garage is that this vehicle actually has a large repair kit for free, and it's infinite. So you will have, and it's also slightly better. It provides a 15% improved repair speed compared to a large premium consumable, which will only give you 10. And look at this, look at that hydro pneumatic suspension. I was actually just checking it out for myself at the first time. It was actually brilliant, but you are a little bit slower inside it, so I guess at this time I decided to drop back, but oh dear, there's a Charfu Tier 4, manages to overmatch my side armor once, also tracking me at the same time, and this is where you start to feel like a bit of a glass cannon tank. I'm wondering, is the Charfu Tier 4 going to come after me again? And that is not an engagement that you ever want to take in this vehicle, i.e. getting absolutely splatted by the French medium. So that repair kit, so useful. Right now I'm not inside the siege mode, and you can tell if I'm inside the siege mode or not depending on whether you see the fancy crosshair in the center of the screen. I actually sometimes forget in this replay to see if you can spot where I'm using the wrong mode. But if you forget inside the Kunze Panzer, which is very different to a Swedish vehicle, because inside a Swedish vehicle you're either moving or you're inside the siege mode, and so it's very easy to remember whether you were inside the siege mode or not. Inside the Kunze Panzer, you are sometimes going to have to look into the middle of your screen unless you've got some kind of a telepathic memory, or not telepathic. You don't really need to be able to predict something that isn't in front of you. It is right in front of you. At least if you don't have like idiot reactions like me, then you can just look. Is there a big green crosshair in the center of your screen? You can see down here and down here. If the answer is yes, then you're in the siege mode. So you're going to have better aim time, you're going to have better accuracy, but be warned that you're also going to have a bad rate of fire. And so let's see if we can make this accuracy work. Why did I leave the mode and then fire? Oh my lord, absolute potato baby. I thought that I needed to go inside the siege mode to have the better accuracy, and I'm not even in it trying to snipe at the cupolas. Looks like I realized my mistake. Now we're going to have the enhanced accuracy. Our accuracy just went from 0.42 down to 0.3, and boom, able to snipe into the cupola of the E75. Lovely, fantastic, just what we ordered. But I'm also making a mistake here. That's because I'm not leaving the siege mode as soon as I fired to be able to gain the increased rate of fire. And that happens very quickly indeed. But oh, gotta love that 0.3 accuracy with this tank. And then to still have enough mobility to be able to pull back out of the harm's way of the E75. Now you're not going to see me doing it inside this replay because, as I mentioned, this was the first one. But look at those kind of reactions that you can have. And you can really surprise your opponents with the 15 degrees of gun depression. Just look at this thing. It's tilting the back of the tank up to be able to gain that gun depression. There aren't many tanks that can be able to use this position. This is kind of like 12 degrees territory. Later on in this tank review, we're going to see 15 degrees territory. Spoilers, it's not going to be in this replay, but just wait for it. But yeah, so later on, I actually figured out with the vehicle that as soon as you fire, if you don't need to move, and even if you are using your gun depression, just like in the Swedish tanks, especially the UDES, if you leave the siege mode, your vehicle will go from being kind of tilted into that position to actually hiding the turret a little bit more. And then you will have a better reload afterwards. And so it's quite a tricky tank to master. And I'm not trying to pretend like I have already mastered it, but I feel like these are just hopefully pieces of advice that are going to be able to help you if you get the Kunze Panzer to be able to take it to the next level. And that is that after you fire, if you don't need to move immediately to get out of harm's way, just leave the siege mode. And is there a delay? As far as I've found, unless Wargaming's UI is incorrect, you gain the enhanced rate of fire, i.e. 20%, 25% better rate of fire, and the DPM, of course, along with it, as soon as you press the button. And so you can have that accurate shot, leave the siege mode, you're going to have the plus 25% DPM, immediately. Of course, you're not going to be able to move for 2 seconds, but your tank is still reloading during that period. And then what you can do is then you can enter the siege mode with 2 seconds left. You'll lose probably about a quarter of a second or half a second of the reload speed because, of course, you're losing the DPM. But then you can make the accurate shot. And that is just what the vehicle's all about. Sit there outside the siege mode, get the rate of fire going, and then enter the siege mode again once you've managed to have a fairly quick reload, and then place another accurate shot again. And here we go, AMX-30 going to make their way. You'll see that I'm actually going to sit inside the siege mode. This is a misplay. I'm leaving the siege mode now to get the improved rate of fire so we can reload quick enough to be able to put another shot in. And now I'm going to stay outside the siege mode to have the better DPM. And that was the correct play. Even though I maybe wasn't making the correct play through knowledge, that's what I should have done. I'm going to pretend like, yeah, I knew about that. That I knew that my rate of fire was better, and I needed the mobility to be able to get away, and I didn't need to be accurate in the close quarters situation, and so that's why we did that. Do as I say, not sometimes as I do in my first game inside the Kunze Panzer. Oh, this is a really important shot. And so I actually fluffed this situation so much. I decide to enter to gain the extra accuracy. Well, so much. In fact, that wasn't actually that bad of a play. Entering the siege mode to be able to gain the accuracy against the Chafu Tier 4, to be able to put that pinpoint shot into a shell that just magically ricochets off. Yeah, a bit of an awkward situation. Now I leave the siege mode to be able to improve the rate of fire of the tank, but more importantly to be able to have that extra mobility that I need to be able to dodge the self-propelled gun shells. And this is one of those very awkward situations. You're playing in a glass cannon tank, a very lightly armored vehicle against 3 self-propelled guns. We have a 263 to the east, we have a self-propelled gun to the west, and I'm trying to think about what is the best way to handle this. Should I go and try and fight the Chafu Tier 4 who's spotted on 693 hit points? I need to shoot them at least twice to be able to finish them off. And even if artillery hits them, I might not be able to finish them off with my 390 Alpha. No, I decide that I actually saw a tree fall at the time, which I pinged, that I can sneak out because the Char wasn't going to spot me. Then I let my team know that I plan to go and try and deal with the artillery, and that hopefully the 263 on my team should realize, oh, okay, I need to just sit here. And it looks like my artillery is going to sit and prepare for the Chafu Tier 4. And this is where the Kunze Panzer is just so fantastic. It's not like a Swedish medium tank where you have great gun depression, 12 degrees, but your mobility is quite poor. This is a tier 9 tank with the opportunity to have 15 degrees of gun depression that also has the mobility once you leave the siege mode to be able to go around and play like a regular vehicle. And here we go, Batchat 15555, HE shell through the side of the tank, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And as I get spotted, the Chafu Tier 4 holds his W key, goes forwards towards the 263. I'm hoping that the 263 can manage to put in a few shells. 263 goes down, artillery snap kills the Chafu Tier 4, and I was feeling very happy at this moment, but oh dear, I wasn't feeling so happy now. I missed the shell against the M5355, and now I've got another high explosive round loaded. Hopefully it should be able to take him out. Doesn't manage to, so I decide to stop loading HE, get splashed by the other artillery. I'm down to 85 hit points after I got hit for 429, and this artillery is trying to ram me. Yeah, mate, good try. I'm not going to miss that one. And now I know that I've got about 15 seconds or so until the other artillery reloads. I've got high explosive rounds, which should allow me to be able to kill them in a single shot. I decide to enter the siege mode to try and put a pinpoint shell in. Remember that these high explosive rounds do have 480 damage, so I should be able to kill this player in a single shot at least the vast majority of the time. One thing to highlight as well is, look, these high explosive rounds actually have 1,173 meters a second shell velocity. That's fantastic. All right, so what am I going to do here? Well, I am going to just avoid the enemy's self-propelled gun. I'm outside the siege mode now, so I have that extra mobility. And, well, it's pretty obvious what I have to do. And that is not risk my hit points. The worst thing that I could do now would be to allow the enemy's self-propelled gun to have a shot on me. And so I asked my M5355 to come and help. All I have to do right now is just stay calm and keep the M5355 proxy spotted. If I do that, he looks like he's worried about getting splashed by the enemy artillery, which is probably the right thing to do. But little does he know that we are planning on ambushing the enemy team. And also, little does he know that QuickyBaby was also planning on making an awesome thumbnail for his video. Oh, that's very good. Look at that multitasking. camping with an artillery behind a rock while QuickyBaby also poses at the same time, knowing that this was a pretty good replay to do the thumbnail for the video. You know, that's pretty cheeky, right? You can see I even do it. Did you recognize this one? Maybe this will be the thumbnail I use for the video. Maybe I'll get it from something else. Oh dear, a little bit cheeky there. So M5355 has arrived. Look at that multitasking. A content creation professional here, obviously. But right now, the worst thing that I could do is once again go around this corner. I basically have to wait. And look, even though the M5355 got fired at from my M5355, this artillery, spoilers, is a very good player. They have a good win ratio. They're using the anonymizer though, so you won't be able to see that. I'm not going to show you in the post-game stats either and reveal their name or whatever. But they knew exactly what they had to do in this situation, and that is not to kill my M5355, but to kill me. And so I was using the third person to see that the M5355 was never firing and also was only aiming at me. So I'm worried about going around this corner because I feel like they could splash me. But I also need to proxy spot this M5355. And we can see, like, they're thinking about it. Will they go for it? No, they won't. They hesitate. They don't want to. And right now, this M5355 is actually incredibly sneaky because they realize, hey, I'm probably going to get flanked, right? And so they start to aim towards me, even though I'm not spotted right now. This M5355 was a great player. I tell my M5355 that he faces me. The M5355, watch this, actually will turn round to go after me. And I don't manage to kill him with an HE with an incredible low roll. I panic and I push forwards and oh dear, luckily the artillery misses me. I don't miss them. And to be fair, my artillery would have probably managed to get the ram kill with the 2 hit points, right? Talk about low rolling, 480 average against a 450 tank. No, I'm actually not happy about the fact that I did push around the corner there. All I should have done is shot the player and then I should have fallen back. And then hoped that they turned around and dealt with my artillery. I actually gave the enemy artillery a chance. I nearly gave him exactly what they wanted, which was to kill me and then to have a one-on-one duel against a self-propelled gun, right? But luckily for me, that shell didn't hit me. But still, I did pen an HE shell on them. Shout out to the M5355 on my team. It was an absolute pleasure to play with you through this one, and GG that we managed to take this one down. However, look, this was a good game, a good first game for the Kunze Panzer. I didn't really get to show you what this thing is capable of with regards to its gun depression, which is its main feature. So let's check it out. All right, round 2 on Overlord. Everybody knows just how good gun depression is on the Overlord map. And let me show you the strengths of this vehicle after I've had a few games in it. I started to have an idea of how you were meant to play this tank at this point. And just take a look. We race up into position, we enter the siege mode, and now we've got 15 degrees of gun depression. And just look at this. We can manage to shoot the AMX there. Just take a look at this. I've got to pause this for a second. Just how fabulous this vehicle is. When it's using that hydropneumatic suspension, it tilts the back of the tank up, the front of the tank, well, it goes down by proxy, right? And that allows you to do some absolutely preposterous things. Just look at this. Here are all of the basic tanks with the basic gun depressions. You can see we've got 5 degrees here, 8 degrees here, 9 or 8 degrees there. We've got 10 degrees. They all have to sit up in the bush. We don't have to sit up in the bush, and we could have managed to shoot the vehicle opposite us. Rinoceronte, all of these tanks, they have to expose a lot of their vehicle to be able to be effective in a location like that. The Kunze Panzer can stay right down on the ridgeline, or it can even use ridgelines that other tanks can only dream of. Emil 2, a vehicle with 12 degrees of gun depression, an absolute god of a ridgeline, and definitely I'd rather be in an Emil 2 for being hull down, if I can use the 12 degrees of gun depression, right? Because that vehicle has incredible turret armor, but the Kunze Panzer, as I'm going to show you here, can manage to use positions that other tanks can only dream of. Just look at this. I'm going to pause it once again. Look at this tank. This is just absolutely savage, and all of you advanced World of Tanks players out there will just be thinking about the opportunities that 15 degrees of gun depression present to you. Imagine how small of a silhouette the enemy team are being able to see through this bush. They are seeing a very small amount of my tank over this ridgeline, and it gives you so much more flexibility to be able to handle your opponents. It's just absolutely beautiful. And so that allows us, inside the siege mode, to have 0.3 accuracy and to snipe around easily into the AMX 50B's turret. And that is where this tank is just perfect. the kind of situation where you don't need a flashy rate of fire inside the siege mode, but you need to use the flexibility and the accuracy to be able to make those pinpoint shots against your opponents. And that is where this tank is king, and it will be one of your favorite vehicles. This one is definitely worth picking up if you love gun depression. I'd say that this vehicle is definitely not going to be for the average World of Tanks player. They'll do okay in it. Look, honestly, you could probably just play this tank like a Leopard prototype and never use the siege mode. Of course, you wouldn't be maximizing your possible impact in this tank with this awesome accuracy and the awesome gun depression the vehicle has. But you could still do well. It's not like the vehicle is that bad. Its accuracy is 0.42, which isn't great, but it still has 10 degrees of gun depression. It has great DPM. It's got good mobility. You could play the tank outside of using the siege mode, and you could still do very well. And there will probably be players who get this vehicle who don't even realize that it does have a siege mode. Yeah, they'll still do okay. But really, once you start to master the siege mode, you saw how awkward it was for me in my first game. And then hopefully now you're going to see just how much finesse it can bring on these ridge lines. It's definitely going to be a bit more of a camping vehicle. Look at that precise shot into the 430U. But really, this tank is in positions and has lines of fire that often in my gameplay inside it, the enemy didn't expect. You don't expect there to be a tank in a 15 degrees gun depression position, and you don't expect a tank to be able to hit you from that. It's definitely going to show a player's awareness, or knowledge I should say, of the map, and also to test the awareness of players about where these vehicles might be and the opportunities that they provide for getting shots in. So just look at how bad this vehicle is at advancing inside the siege mode. I'm slower than the 430. I could have left the siege mode there. But again, I kind of want to get that precise shot in. But yeah, actually, in retrospect, terrible play here. I like having the accuracy. You're seeing that I'm thinking about shooting the player's tracks, but I didn't realize they're actually facing backwards. We actually managed to spot the WTF Panzer IV. What this shows you is that you can actually just drive around inside the siege mode if you want. You're not going to be like a super fast medium tank, but you're not going to be slow. One thing that I love about this part of the replay is that you'll see that the vehicle actually has a really low silhouette, hence why it has that extra camo rating on the vehicle. And now we're going to use that 15 degrees of gun depression to poke up on the ridge to get the Type 61. And then I'm actually going to adjust my position because I thought that I was exposing too much of my hull there, and I only want to expose my turret. So I go forwards expecting to be able to get the standard B. Then I decide that the standard B is not going to be there. So instead I'm going to flank around and try and attack this northern flank. Now I'm worried about the Leopard prototype. I'm worried about getting caught out by the standard B, and I definitely don't want to get caught by that TVP. This vehicle doesn't do very well against autoloaders because obviously it's going to get overmatched by most of the rounds. Remember, only 91mm needed to be able to overmatch the side of the vehicle, and only 121mm needed to overmatch the front of the vehicle. Horrific from that perspective. So if you're not using a ridgeline and you're not using the mobility of the vehicle, then you're probably not using the vehicle right at all. So I go inside the siege mode to put an accurate shot into the 50 TP, but unfortunately they managed to club me. And I was really worried about the TVP right now. Yeah, really don't want to get hit by that tank, and I'm loading heat, which is very unfortunate for me because I'm flustered about the TVP, constantly thinking, shall I get the shot into them? And yeah, it's probably a good idea to finish off the tier 10 tank. Now the Leopard prototype has managed to spot me, and now this is fairly awkward. Did you notice how slowly our vehicle went backwards there because we're inside the siege mode? And this is just a good example of probably a fail on my behalf and my lack of experience inside the tank. I probably should leave the siege mode now and try to use the extra mobility, but it's also very awkward because if I leave the siege mode, then I'm going to have a terrible accuracy in this vehicle, and I won't have the gun depression, although in this position I don't have the gun depression. And so I didn't think it was fair for me to make this tank review and to not show the aspects of this tank that are both great, but also the aspects of this tank that are horrific. You saw how good this vehicle was on a ridgeline, but right now I can tell you, I wish I was in my Kampfpanzer. I wish I was in a Soviet tank. I wish I was in an E50M. Gosh, I wish I was in pretty much every other vehicle rather than a Kunze Panzer. Because this tank, in that situation, just felt horrific. It felt like it had no armor. It felt like it had really bad gun handling when you have to move inside the siege mode. And then when you're not in the siege mode, your accuracy is awful. So it's not the perfect tank. And that's good, because if it was the perfect tank, then it would probably be an overpowered tank. Do I think that the vehicle is overpowered? Well, given the right situation, I think in the hands of a very capable player, this is definitely not something that you're going to want to see on the enemy team, because it has capabilities that other tanks can only dream of. And any time that you have a vehicle that has new capabilities, be it a new autoloader with big damage, or a new autoloader with gun depression, or in this vehicle's case, just 15 degrees of gun depression with the siege mode, you're giving it opportunities to do new things. And new things in World of Tanks, in the hands of knowledgeable players, means that there are just things that you're going to get caught out by. There are things that the enemy team are going to do that are unexpected. And the Kunze Panzer is definitely going to be one of those. So if you see one of these on the enemy team, hope that it's in the hands of a new player. And a player who's just bought their way through the battle pass and haven't got 50,000 games of World of Tanks experience, or at least, yeah, with hopefully a positive win ratio to their name. Because those kind of players are going to be able to take these tanks into positions that you will not expect and probably be very efficient in them. And alternatively, if you see one of these on the enemy team and they look like they're maybe a little lost inside the vehicle, oh, they're going to be so juicy. Talk about a terrible hull. Talk about not the best handling gun. Not terrible, but not the best handling gun. You should look at these as opportunities to be able to feast upon. So it's going to be kind of that famine or feast vehicle. So our first game on Tundra was an ace tanker for the 1,368 base experience that we achieved. 4,500 damage exactly got us a high caliber, and we get a Dimitri's medal for destroying 3 enemy self-propelled guns in a single battle. We kind of pretty much broke even in this game if we take away the 50,000 credits for it being my first win of the day. We made 23,000 credits with a premium account. One of the nice things about this vehicle, as I mentioned, however, is that it gets a free large repair kit, and so you won't ever have to pay for repair kit usages, which are pretty much every single battle, right? So that, while it's not going to be a premium tank making you lots of amounts of credits, it's definitely going to be one of the more economic tier 90 play, especially considering that it does have very nice penetration on its rounds, so you shouldn't even have to fire that much gold ammunition. Next up on Overlord, we managed to finish second on damage, and we finished 4th on experience. This game was more about showing you where the vehicle can be very dominant on the ridge line, managing to get 5,000 combined in this game. But also it can show you how bad it can be towards the latter part of the game when it gets caught out in those kind of long range fires against fairly durable tanks like the T10. So now reality sets in. How can you manage to get the Kunze Panzer? Well, if you want to get one of these, you're going to have to earn 18 tokens this year in Wargaming's Battle Pass system. And if you want to earn 18 tokens, then unfortunately you're going to have to buy Wargaming's premium Battle Pass for this season, as you can get 9 tokens by playing the game without the improved pass, and 9 additional tokens for playing the game with the improved pass. Now, while Wargaming, at least as far as I'm concerned, haven't confirmed it, this isn't going to be the only season of the Battle Pass this year. The first season of the Battle Pass will run from today, which will be the release day of this tank review, for 3 months. However, that's only going to lead on until mid-May, and I believe there are probably going to be 3 seasons available this year. And so, while you won't get the Kunze Panzer immediately unless you buy the Battle Pass and you also spend a ridiculous amount of gold in skipping all of the stages, if you see some of these Kunze Panzers on day 1, unless they are Wargaming content creators, you expect that you are seeing some pretty big whales on the enemy team. Then while Wargaming haven't confirmed, I believe there are going to be 3 seasons. And so if there are 3 seasons available, it will be enough to complete 2 of the 3 seasons, and then you're going to be able to get the Kunze Panzer by the end of the year. Alternatively, if there are only going to be 2 seasons this year, then you're going to have to complete each season to be able to get 9 tokens plus 9 tokens to get the 18 tokens to be able to get this vehicle. And spoilers, I will also be reviewing the K91 PT on the channel soon, which is a tier 9 Soviet reward tank destroyer, which will cost 12 tokens. And so you're going to have to kind of make a decision about which one that you want to get. if you are a free-to-play player. And it's interesting for me that unlike the previous years where it was either enough to play Steel Hunter or play Frontline, now you feel you have to get involved with the Battle Pass system to be able to grind it all out. But at least you will get points for playing Steel Hunter, playing Frontline, and I think you're even going to get points for playing ranked battles as well. So if you are the holistic World of Tanks player that wants to play the entire game, then good news for you. If you play, you're pretty much going to get a Kunze Panzer by the end of the year. However, if you're a player who doesn't have a lot of time to play, you're probably going to have to spend a lot of gold to be able to get this tank. Irrelevant of the way that you will have to get this vehicle, I think this is a nice tank. I don't think it's overpowered. I think that it's just going to be a nice, fun vehicle for people to have. I don't think it's going to be necessary for you to be able to get, because tier 9, let's be honest, it's not the most important tier to have inside the game. Although I would say it's one of the most fun tiers. You're not going to be able to take it into Frontline. You're not going to be able to take this thing into ranked battles. You're not going to be able to use it in your clan wars at tier 10. You're not going to be able to use it in most of the competitive events that Wargaming have. But maybe you'll be able to use it to grind through some of the mission marathons if that's your thing, as long as Wargaming keep allowing us to use tier 9 tanks. All in all, cool vehicle. Love the gun depression. Just not quite perfect. I think a lot of people will find this vehicle maybe a little bit frustrating, but I think in the hands of the average or the advanced World of Tanks player, yeah, the Kunze Panzer is going to be a great vehicle for you. So anyway, that was it for today, ladies and gents. Really hope you liked my extensive look at the Kunze Panzer. If you did, make sure you give the video a thumbs up. But if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know what you think about the tank. Does it look absolutely incredible? And also, what do you think about Wargaming's whole Battle Pass system? Do you think that you just want to be able to get the vehicle now? How do you feel about the fact that the premium players are going to be getting tokens in this system rather than having to grind Frontline like you did last time? What would you rather? Grind a little bit of everything, or just grind the entirety of Frontline, or grind the entirety of Steel Hunter? And as always, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned to the channel as I will be reviewing the K91 PT shortly as well. And thank you very much for watching. Catch you in the next one.